we went into battle, all the air was cut off there, and it was condition of firm was set. That means that everything was closed up, and it got awful hot, very, very hot that night. And everybody was perspiring. There was so much, I'll tell you what, there was so much sweat on the floor that it was running back and forth, right? Remember that?
I know that night I cut the gripes off of 436 5-inch shells and sent them up the hoist.
In any sea engagement, very few people aboard ship ever see the enemy or what's going on. Most of them is inside the ship somewhere. My battle station was topside, beside or under or behind turret 1, kicking the powder cases out of the way. And when we first went to general quarters, our main battery was elevated about as high as they could go. That meant that the enemy, we knew it was going to be a night engagement because it was about midnight. And the guns were elevated so high, that meant the enemy was many, many miles away from us. I kept watching the guns lower and lower and lower till they looked like this on an absolute level or point blank range. I knew he was getting close, so I get underneath the turret where I had to be. Soon the guns started shooting. I actually saw the flash of the fire as it came out of the torpedo tubes, and I knew what was happening. But at the same time as after they fired those 3 torpedoes, I think all 16 5-inch guns hit her and just lifted her up out of the water and down she went. That's a real quick sink of that destroyer. We were so close to the troop ships, we could see that we hit was on fire. We could see them jumping overboard. It was that close to them.
The Japanese had fired, when they shot at us, a salvo of 70 torpedoes out of their ships at us. We only got hit on a few of them, if anything, if any high percentage hit. But their idea was, we wanted one of them to go off and put him out of commission, and then we can kill him off later.
And their torpedoes was a lot larger than ours.
The Japanese long lance torpedo, and it was a 24-inch torpedo. It was so much bigger, deadlier than ours that there was no comparison. For example, in speed, theirs 55 knots, ours 31, 33 knots. In range, they could shoot them from 15,000 yards with no problem, run the whole thing. Ours were generally shot from about 8,000 yards.
I was on Mount 1 above the pilot house when that thing hit. I don't even know what hit until after I was down on the main deck. I was standing in water up there. The whole mouth was full of water. Just went over the mast. We were all washed down on the main deck. And scared. Ain't nobody any scarier than I was. I was ready to jump. Somebody said the second one's coming. I'd have been the second one. I wouldn't have been the first one, but I'd have probably been the second one.
The first sensation, of course, there was a jar, but that we were lifted. I thought we were lifted up. The bow was lifted up out of the water, and then it started to sink. And for a while, I thought we were headed down to Davy Jones.
I felt this thing, and it felt like the bow was going to go down like a submarine.
It felt just like we had hit a stone wall when that torpedo hit us. And of course, being in the fire room, we had no idea of what had happened. So finally we did get word that we had been torpedoed when the ship stopped, because the bridge quit asking for steam.
When the torpedo come, of course, we don't know what the hell, we didn't know the torpedo was coming because we're blind down there. And we just see each other. When the torpedo hit, all the powder jumped out of the holders that they were in cases. They jumped forward and jolted us pretty damn good, scared us to death. But we didn't know at that time that the torpedo was in the neck. It went off in the next compartment over.
I started looking for my life jacket. I didn't have no life jacket. Somebody else grabbed it. I was without a life jacket. Of course, it wouldn't have done me much good down there. Anyway, I don't think.
They let us out, and we got topside where we get air. Sure was too good to get out of there, because we sure thought we was going to die. But the real danger lied in what we found out about a week later, that in the short time after, before we got out, and they opened the scuttle, and the hatch above us, as an armored hatch to let us out. They had been trying to make a decision on the bridge where they wanted to flood that magazine we were in. But they didn't have any intentions of letting us out, but we didn't know it. We would have been scared as hell if we'd have known it. But
We wouldn't have had a chance.
there was two commanders fighting over it, and one, I forgot what his name was, and one of them won out. And I'm pretty sure that's what saved her life, because one of the idiots up there was wanting to flood it. Damage control, or somebody up there takes a big T-wrench and lets you out, so we possibly could have got out if we'd had a big hammer, but it would have been pretty tough to get out. You just don't do it. You die.
I was about 50 feet from where the torpedo hit, and the fellow was with me at the battle station. He was blowing up against the side of the lifelines, and he looked around, he couldn't find me. And what happened, alongside, on the side of turret 1, there's life rafts was tied to the side of the turret. One of those, the concussion tore the life raft loose and fell on top of me.
You were under.
So I was underneath that life raft for one contact, just for a few minutes. He went below the decks and reported me blowing over the side.
We were opening fire at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning after midnight in the darkness. The ship was making about 25 knots through the water when it happened. When the torpedo hit and exploded at the bow,
I was number 1 fire room. I was boiler relief. I was new on the ship at the time. Everything was going fine. I'm watching every guy do his job. I had nothing to do. I had to sit in the corner, squat down on the deck, waiting for something. It happened. The torpedo hit. I stood up. I said, what do I do? I wanted to go for the hatch. I wanted to get out or give me something to do. The lieutenant, I forget his name, he said, sit down, be quiet, everything's under control. I said, that's what you tell me, but I don't think so. I want out because I have nothing to do here. He said, well, just let us do our job and maybe we'll survive. And that's just what I did. I sat down, I shut my face. I was scared out of my britches, 18, you know.
and then we waited for the next one to hit to see if it was gonna do the same thing to St. Louis it was done to Helena, namely sink it. The next one was a dud. It hit the starboard side of the ship about underneath number 4 turret, a little bit forward of that. It made an indentation, the correct size for the nose cone of a Japanese torpedo, but it did not penetrate. If it had penetrated, it is very likely that it would have finished the St. Louis off exactly like the Helena had been finished off the week before. But it didn't happen. It didn't explode.